Hey y'all, this is Bewindi Bob just stopping by to share some amazing news with you. If you've been listening to the podcast, then you may already know, but let me just let you know this today. I am now a published author. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Lord. I'm so thankful, so excited to share these resources with you. My first release is the book entitled Empowerment for You, Encouragement for Your Emotional and Spiritual Wellness. Listen, this book is filled with information, insight, inspiration, and specific tips and practical strategies for your emotional and spiritual wellness journey. If you have not gotten this book, I encourage you to purchase one for you. Purchase also, give one as a gift to another sister of yours or to someone else. It is available on Amazon, and I definitely want to hear how this book is blessing your life and adding value to you. My second release, most recent release as of November 2021, is a workbook. Oh my gosh, y'all. It is called the Empowered to Empower You Reflection Workbook. I'm so excited about this workbook. And I know that for those of you who enjoy engaging in self-awareness activities and you love engaging in journaling and reflection, you will enjoy this workbook. It's actually based on the podcast specific episodes where I had dynamic guests. So this workbook is for you too. Both of those resources are available on Amazon. If you have any questions, you let me know and I will be able to answer them for you. Also, will you do me a favor? If any of the episodes has added value to your life, has transformed some things for you, or have just provided you encouragement, will you provide a rating and a review of the podcast or send me a message? I would love to hear from you. I want to hear how the podcast is really enriching your life, and I want to hear how things have changed for you, or you maybe how a specific episode has encouraged you. So I would love to hear from you. Send me a message, complete a rating or review. If you don't know how to do that, just send me a message. Let me know. You can do that by emailing me at bewindi.bob@outlook.com or info@bewindi.com. You can also send me a message on empowered, the number 2 serve on IG. I look forward to hearing from you, and I want you to enjoy the rest of the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Empowered to Empower You podcast. I'm so excited that you decided to tap in today. This is your lovely host, Miss Bewindi Bob. If this is your first time, I want to lovingly welcome you today. If you've been following me since January 2020, listen, I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing the podcast, subscribing to the podcast. I really appreciate it. If you have not rated the podcast, listen, I want you to do that. Go to your platform and just give it a star, give it a rating. This helps people to find the episodes a little bit quicker. I hope that you're safe and well. If you have listened to the previous episode, the previously recorded episode was episode number 105, Self-Care on a Daily Basis with Miss Crystal Alexander. Great conversation, lovely therapist and lovely woman. So I really hope that you enjoyed that episode. If you have not listened to it, feel free to pause this one and listen to that one and come on right back because I'll be right here. I want to welcome you to number 106. I am so excited, y'all. I get to reconnect with a lovely, amazing, dynamic woman in this field, an amazing therapist, an amazing leader. Her name is Mrs.Brittany Johnson. Brittany Johnson is a licensed mental health counselor with a private practice in Southern Indiana. Brittany is certified in several trauma modalities, including racial trauma, eye movement desensitization, reprocessing EMDR, and is also an approved consultant in EMDR. Brittany began her career working with adults who had what was called severe and persistent mental illnesses. She then began working with juveniles involved in the juvenile justice system. This led her to work with children and families who were involved in the juvenile justice system and or child protective services. After many years, she realized that the best way to help the children was to treat the parental mental illness and improve parental skills. This led Brittany back to working exclusively with adults to treat their mental health and to help the adults heal from their childhood trauma that was directly impacting their ability to parent. Brittany is also the author of Get Out of Your Own Way, 21 Days to Stop Self-Sabotage. Through therapy, consulting, training, she is on a mission to reduce stigma around mental health and help women heal from their past trauma and self-sabotage. Listen, I want to welcome you to Brittany, to Empower to Empower You podcast. I am excited to jump in with you. So, hey, Brittany.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm super excited. It has been too long since we've talked, right? So I am excited to be here on your platform. Thank you for having me on yes, thank you so much.
My pleasure. I wanna just start with, where did we meet each other? How do we know each other? I'm so glad I reconnected to you and just asked, hey, I wanna get Brittany here. So let's start with how we met.
Yeah, so we met I'm going to say 2012, maybe some around that time frame. We were both working for a company that did an array of things, but in the state I was in, we did intensive in-home therapy with children and family. And you were the first trauma consultant that I ever worked with. I had got trained in TFCBT, and then I met you, and you were doing my consultations and teaching me more about trauma. And then I never forgot it. Like, I still use the things that you told me way back when, even though our knowledge of trauma has evolved, like what we do, how we treat, how we assess, all that has changed. But I still remember what you told me about. They're bleeding, they're hurting. So things are happening because of that. And I still use that to this day.
That is so profound. I mean, that was not, I don't mind saying the company out loud, because I truly enjoyed and I value and I respect the experiences that we had at Youth Villages, for sure. Yes. So for those of you who are listening, we're talking about Youth Villages. That was the training ground, the battlefield. Listen, basically all of the above.
I tell people all the time, I would not be the therapist I am if I didn't work there. Because doing in-home therapy at the intensity that we did, and the company mission and values, like, to be strength focused, to include the whole family. Like, without that, I don't think I would be where I know for a fact I wouldn't be where I am today. I know for a fact that I wouldn't know that depression, when people say it's, lack of motivation, that looks like a mom not getting off the couch for hours or days. Right. Like, I know for a fact I wouldn't have that knowledge. So I appreciate it.
And it's not non-compliance,
right? And it's not non-compliance. Right. Oh my God.
Yeah, I hate that word. Right?
I did not use it. I still don't use
it. Yes.
Like, no.
Yes, it's so berating. Yeah. But absolutely, I can definitely agree with that. I would not be the clinician that I am today without my experiences at Youth Villages, and I still hold Youth Villages dear to my heart, for sure. If they asked me to come and speak, I would, and I know you would. Right?
I had a dream recently that they invited me to speak on the conference stage, and in my dream, like, I went ahead and like, I used to work here, and this is what I did the whole thing in my dream, and I was like, oh, maybe that'll happen one day.
That will happen. Okay. I love it. So I'm speaking it loud. Hey, we may share this podcast with somebody there, just so they know, like, we're like talking y'all up. Okay.
Right.
Well, tell us about, your journey started at Youth Villages. And as I read in your journey, as I read in your bio, your journey has definitely taken some ups and turns, and to the point of realizing who you really want to serve, and not just who you want to serve, but who you are called to serve, right? This work is
totally different, right?
It's different. It's not who I want to serve, it's who I'm called to serve, right? So talk to us about your journey towards this point in terms of where you are.
So I started doing therapy type work before youth villages when I, had my bachelor's degree. And, I mentioned I worked with severe persistent, those are diagnoses like schizophrenia, schizoaffective, bipolar disorder, rapid cycling. So those were the clients I worked with then, because I really just had this passion to help people who were, almost constantly in crisis, and just to be able to give them ways to find some sort of peace as they were going through the journey. And I didn't want to work with kids then because I have kids of my own, and I wasn't sure I could separate how I parent and see my kids, and then the kids I would be working with at that time. But then I was in graduate school and needed an internship, and two of them had fallen through. They were with an agency that did adults. And one of my colleagues was like, let me introduce you to this guy and just see what you think about him. And so I met, his name was Dr. Young. He was a psychologist in the state of Kentucky. And he invited me to come and work under him in various settings. And so that's how I ended up working with juveniles that were involved with juvenile justice. So these were boys who had committed some type of crime, and were in a lockup. Like it was legit a jail. I mean, they couldn't call it jail because it's kids, but there were people there that had, committed murders. There were people there, some pretty violent acts. And so through that work, like I really enjoyed working with juveniles. And then Dr. Young actually took me to a state meeting once, and someone was talking about youth villages. Had no idea what youth villages was, anything like that. And so when I finished that internship and was graduating, youth villages had moved to and started an office in Indiana. And so I started working there, and then I realized and put the connection, like that was the same place he took me to meet, to talk about what their services could do for the state of Kentucky. But they didn't go to Kentucky, then they went to Indiana. So I was one of the first hires in the state of Indiana for youth villages. So we were, groundwork before we had an office, right? We were working in the libraries and people's houses and hotels, but still serving families with a smile and a joy. And so through doing that work, I just, I started noticing the parents. Like we could do all these things with the kids, right? We can give them all types of coping skills. We can run through all the cognitive skills in the world to get them prepared. But if there's not something at home, what are we doing? And that's the thing I saw with juvenile justice. And so I did my master's thesis on the fact that there wasn't a connection with sending these kids from these places where they learn manners, coping skills, communication skills, job skills, but then sending them right back to their home environments where there's nothing. They don't have to ask their parents for permission to stand up at home, but they do here. So we were seeing kids come back. I was there a year for my internship. And within that year, I saw at least 4 kids that had left and come back because they couldn't function. And so then at youth villages, I continued to see, the parents, like they were really suffering with no help, right? Like there really wasn't services for parents in those settings. And so that's what led me to start working with adults. And then since then, it shifted to primarily women and attachment related trauma. Anxiety is my go-to, but most people with anxiety is really some attachment stuff underneath. And
and I have to say this, even when I met you back then, you've always been somebody. I saw you as somebody. Your passion was so strong. Your personality, you were always so genuine, and you can smell genuineness. Like the kids know it. The dog knows it. Like everybody
everybody knows.
Can know when you really are. Your heart is in what you do. You wanted to know how to serve. You were always just diligent about the work that you did, and always professional, always poised. And I just, even while you're talking about this and in your journey, I could just hear the same heart. I mean, we do evolve, we do grow, but I appreciate your heart for what you said, because it does take heart to really find out what is when we think about juveniles. Sometimes people initially go to, what's wrong with these kids, or those are delinquent kids, and these are bad kids. And
those are my favorites, the ones that they label delinquent. And those were some of my favorite clients because they were hurting the most. Using your term again, like they were hurting the most.
Absolutely. And we have to figure out, and I love working with those boys, at your village. And I hate to keep going back to them, but it is what it is. But I loved working with these boys that nobody else wanted to work with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they were still little boys
They
crying out.
were, yeah,
They were still
crying
little
out.
boys crying out. And even if
Mm-hmm.
the physical is this, rough looking, jagged edge boy, young man who's sagging and very disrespectful and look completely angry at the world. But when they knew that you care, they respect you. They respect when they know that you care and you respect them and you treat them with love and they know they need it. There's
Yeah.
a different level of respect that they
A
want.
level of respect and almost a level of protection, because the in-home part, like, you're
Yeah.
going wherever they are, you know what I mean? So, like, it wasn't always upper middle class houses, and in fact, it was rare that we had someone in upper middle class that had our services, right? So we're going into some areas, and they would almost, I'll never forget a family, like, they were not happy I was showing up at first, but midway through, when they saw, like you said, the genuineness, so that's why I kind of smile. People can't see us, right? But I
Yeah.
smile because I've heard that consistently, and that makes me feel great, because that's who I am. Like, I can't do it if I do not have a poker face, so you're gonna know. But by the midway through, they would have people at the corner to make sure that I could drive into the street without being harmed by other people, because it was a pretty
Right.
violent area, but they had people waiting, and they was like almost like ushering me in to come do services and
I'm in
usher
the
me
hood.
out.
Right.
And the first time I was like, what is going on? And then, they explained, like, we want to protect you, because you are the only one that has helped us keep our kids.
Wow.
Everybody else just sees the worst that we've done in life, and they don't think we deserve our kids. And you're the only, you and your agency are the only ones. And
Wow.
so, like, I have never forgot that. Never.
That's
And that
powerful.
had to be 2013 when that happened. Like, yeah,
Yes.
I
Wow.
still remember vividly. I can, all of it. Yeah.
That is amazing. That is amazing. So tell us why you're passionate. So you said right now your passion, I mean, you're passionate about helping people, but women who
Mhm.
struggle with anxiety, women underneath that, of course, is attachment issues, which is very,
Yes.
very true. Why are you passionate about serving this population?
There's multiple reasons, but if I had to pick maybe my top ones, I
Mhm.
would definitely say that it's because I noticed that women who have anxiety, but when there's really attachment underneath, like, they're anxious in so many areas, and they disrupt all of their relationships. Like, they sabotage, hence I know we'll talk about that later. They sabotage everything in their lives, when it really is like one or two things they could do different or think different about, that could start them on the journey to heal. And
Mhm.
just seeing so many women who've had very damaging relationships with their moms, and
Yes.
how they want to break the cycle, but they don't know how. I've met so many women that are like, I do not want to do what my mom did to me, to my daughter, but they do not know how to do it. And so
Mhm.
I just find a passion in meeting someone who says, I don't think I'll ever be happy, I don't think I'll ever reach my goals, I don't think I will ever live the life that I used to dream about,
Mhm.
because of all these things. I love meeting someone that's where they start, and by the end, they're like, I never thought I'd get here, but I'm so glad I am. And then they run off. Like, I tell people, I have three favorite moments in sessions in therapy: when I first meet you
Yeah.
and I'm learning you, the first time you have that big aha where you're like, my everything is shifting, my thinking is shifting. And then when we say goodbye, those are my three favorite times. I love all of it, but those are
Ooh,
my,
yeah,
yeah,
I love that. I
yeah.
love that.
I love when you don't need me anymore. And that's why I tell them, I love when you don't need to sit in my office anymore.
I love that. But aren't you seeing this is just a commercial break, but aren't you seeing a shift from what we learned for people, they can't see my air quote,
Right.
what we learned in grad school to what we practice in therapy?
Oh my
Aren't
God.
you seeing a shift in terms of what the general expectation of when discharge is supposed to happen from therapy? It doesn't add up because
It doesn't.
there are people, I serve professionals who,
Mhm.
deal with emotional conflicts, whether it's, anxiety, depression, stress, but they're wearing a mask. So they're very
Mhm.
functional. They're going to work. Their wives, their doctors, their police officers, whomever,
Those
but
are my
that
people.
mask, those are my people,
Those are
right?
my people.
Those are my people. That
Yes.
mask doesn't last. And so
Mhm.
a lot of times they realize, oh snap, I don't even have that space anywhere else.
Anywhere.
And so discharge may not look like 8 to 10 sessions.
Right.
They might stick with you about a year
Or longer.
or
Listen,
longer.
can I be transparent on this
Yes,
podcast? Are we allowed?
please.
So even my own therapist, every time we've met in the last 6 months, she's like, all right, I think we're done. I'm like, no, we're not. I don't know what you thought this was. Finally, I
This
understand and had to be done, I was done. But no, I have not seen 10 to 12 weeks really ever.
and I'm gonna be honest. We're gonna come back to the topic, but it's all intertwined. It all connects. I had to shift my paradigm because I would bring up, okay, let's review your goals. It sounds like you've met your goals. Let's go over your maintenance plan. It sounds like you understand your triggers, your warning signs. You have a support system. It sounds like let's go back to the initial vision that you identified of where you would be when you finish therapy. It sounds like you're there.
Oh,
Let's
that was me for a long time.
and they would look at they would start crying.
Yes.
Like, what do you? Oh no,
I had
man.
a few people create new problems just to, and so then I'm like, what is going on? But if I'm being honest, because of that grad school piece, and some of the agency work is very similar to that too.
Very similar.
I had it in my mind that if I wasn't getting them through air quote, people can't see my air quotes. If I wasn't getting them through in 12 weeks, I failed. I was failing. I'm a bad therapist. Yes, that was yes. So once that shift happened, and I was like, people take the time they need to heal. There's no time frame for healing. There was not really a time frame for when the things happen to you. So there's no way there's a time frame for when it's over. When you're over it, like, yeah.
I am rejuvenated by our conversation right now. This is so good. And I know some people who listen, they're gonna laugh. I'm sure there are clients who listen to this podcast as well, right? And I will say this, we'll talk about the disclaimer towards the end because this does not replace the need for therapy for sure. But I think it's really good to have these conversations. And so when you mentioned sabotage, for people who don't, of course, you and I know what that is, but for people who are listening, so we have a broad audience who listen, people who might be in therapy, people who are thinking about therapy, people who've never gone through therapy, just abroad, and they're all over. Okay. So for people who don't know what sabotage is, how would you define it?
Good question. I've talked about it so much that oh man, bare bones, I would say sabotage is when you are on a path, whether it's in a relationship, your career, just life in general, and you subconsciously or intentionally decide that you aren't good enough to have this, you're not perfect enough to have this. So you do something to derail it. You may not know that you're doing that. I meet so many people that they do not have a single clue that starting that fight on Tuesdays because you've been happy for 5 days is sabotage. And we have to talk about those cycles. So that's how I would say bare bones is that you are either intentionally or a lot of times subconsciously destroying your plans, destroying your situation.
Getting in the way of your goals too. So if we were to kind of name a few examples, a few common examples of self-sabotaging behaviors, what would you say they are?
The number one I always use is diet and exercise. Right? So you start off on Monday, right? You got this meal plan, right? You probably went to the store on Sunday, made all this food, and you are Monday, you're rocking it. Tuesday, you are like, okay, yes. Wednesday, you get called into a late meeting at work, so you miss your scheduled time to eat. And now you tell yourself, we'll just start again next Monday because we've already messed up today. So no need to even try to worry about tomorrow. We got to wait till Monday to start over. That's my biggest example of sabotage. And we do that with our goals. The other one that people don't really like to talk about is the one where we don't feel like we're good enough. And no one wants to admit that. No one ever wants to say, you know what, I'm just not good enough. So instead, we will make sure that we don't turn in something on time, or we will make sure that we do it halfway, just so that when it goes wrong, not even if, but when it goes wrong, we could say, well, I just really didn't even put a lot of energy and time and effort into that. So that's why that happened. Or we pass up opportunities that we know we can take, we know we can handle, but there's this thing in us that says we're not good enough. So we just decide, you know what, I'm not going to do it. Right. So I know we'll probably talk about my book, but the example in my book I use is a woman who was highly educated. She was ready for another promotion, and she couldn't bring herself to accept it because
Mhm.
she didn't think she was good enough, even though she had degrees on the walls, plaques on the walls, constant people telling her like you are everything. She didn't believe it. And so through our work, she was able to work through figuring out what it is, how it happens, and then accept the promotion by the end.
Mm. As you're talking, because so many other examples come from me too, like
Mhm.
overthinking,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Procrastinating is a self-sabotage behavior,
Mhm.
overindulgence. But as you're talking, there's this buzzword going around, flying around. I'm sure it's flying around in Indiana too. Is that where you still in Indiana?
Mhm. Yep. I'm still in Indiana. Yep.
Oh, imposter syndrome. I feel like imposter syndrome is all embedded in self-sabotage.
It is.
It's
So in my book, there's a whole section on it, like because
okay.
it's one of the top three. So in the book,
Yeah.
please, I'll purchase the book, everyone listening, please, but I'll give you a little hint that I break it down to not good enough, imposter syndrome, and perfectionism. Like those
Yep.
are the three categories because no matter what the sabotage thing is, it always falls to one of those three.
It does. Well, I
Mm-hmm.
can talk about your book. So earlier, you mentioned that you are on a mission to help reduce the stigma around mental health and really help women heal from their past trauma. Talk
Mm-hmm.
to us more about, how that's going, especially during this time. I'm sure you're serving more and more women, and how are those women coming to you, right? How are they,
Yeah.
yeah, how are they finding out, or how are they coming to you for sure?
So word of mouth is a powerful thing. It can make or break you, right? So my number one avenue is word of mouth.
Mhm.
Someone has come to therapy, had a great experience, so they tell all their friends, and then they want to come. But the other is like social media. So
Mhm.
I'm pretty heavy on Instagram, and Facebook too, but really heavy on Instagram, which is making sure that I put out something every day that just kind of reminds us that it's okay to be where you are because you're going to go where you're going to go, right? So no need to harp on things that you're not doing in this moment
Mhm.
because you can do them later. So that's the top ways that people find me. I was doing a lot of speaking engagements, but I kind of slowed down on that for some other reasons. Um, but also my podcast. I also have a podcast as well. So I'm back doing that. I stopped doing it last year, but I'm back,
Yeah.
and I've decided that that's going to be the way that I connect now because what I noticed through the pandemic and just even progression of career, I can't serve everyone, right? Like there's only so many hours in the day. And as in the therapy world, if you're going to be a great therapist, you have to know your limits of how many you really can handle in a day. This
Yes.
isn't those agencies that make you do 8 hours of therapy. Like that's not how it is if
Mm.
you really want to have a lasting impact.
Mhm.
So I realized like I can't. I need to broaden my reach.
Mhm.
And I'm a God girl. Is that okay? Are we allowed to have God in here?
This is
Okay.
all about Jesus. I
Listen.
forgot to say this. Empower to Empower You podcast is about all things Jesus Christ, mental health,
Okay.
and anything for your overall wellness to help you be the best version of yourself.
I love it. So I am a God Jesus girl, whatever you want to call it. And so I have no doubt that he has put this on me to do or in me to do, not on me, because it's not a burden. I'm not burdened at all. I enjoy being able to do what I'm called to do. In fact, I get physically sick when I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do.
Wow.
Physically sick. I thought like I had some kind of parasite or something, but I've worked like through therapy, realized it's like psychosomatic that if I'm not following what I'm supposed to be doing, I get sick.
Wow. Wow.
Mhm.
I've never heard that one.
I know. I was like,
So,
what is only
I-
me?
no, I'm sure you're not alone.
I'm not. I found a whole group of people that like there's a lot of groups out there where people talk about like,
Oh.
because there's a lot of passion.
And I could see that because lack of alignment is equivalent to lack of balance. So,
It is.
so
Mhm.
wow, I love talking to you. Like I could see
Me
this.
too.
Listen, I could see this just kind of be 4 hour conversation, but we're not gonna do that to the people.
I know, right?
Oh gosh, there was so much that you said. So let me ask you this really quickly before, because I want to talk about your podcast. I want to talk about your book, but I wanted to say something too. I so agree with you. I really love the platform. I love podcasting because it is a way to reach the masses, And
Mhm.
there's no borders, there's no state, there's no limitations. It can reach the people in the Caribbean, it can reach the people in Africa, it could reach the whole United States. There's
Everywhere.
everybody, right?
Mhm.
And when I started it, I didn't do it to monetize it.
Mhm.
I do it as it's ministry. Now that can change later on, but
Yeah.
I really love, and I also appreciate that I can have other people sharing it with me, so I can help to highlight the person like you and your work that you're doing for sure. So when based on the work that you're doing, right?
Mhm.
And if this is getting into your book, just tell me and we'll move forward. Why do people get in the way? Why do people get in the way? What have you found based on the work that you've done? Why do they get in their own way?
Whew. So like I said, those categories, right?
Yeah.
So underneath it all, and I have found through my work that to reach the people that I'm called to reach, I have to use non-therapy terms oftentimes because using clinical terms, clinical language, it's a turnoff, especially if you are a person who pride yourself on being, able to handle things and do things and not need help from anybody under any capacity. It's a turnoff to hear things like, oh, anxiety, things like trauma. What I've learned though is that not good enough is rooted in trauma. And every time I've talked to somebody who has that belief, they can pinpoint a time when they were young, elementary young, where
Mhm.
someone planted that inside their brain by a situation, by their words, and they've carried it.
Yep.
And so then they're like, I can't, yeah, I'm just not good enough to do that. It's not for me.
Mhm.
Imposter syndrome, two things on that. Thing number one, that is rooted in, let me think of how to say this. It's rooted, especially for Black women, it's rooted in white supremacy. It's rooted in this idea that we are not um, blonde hair, brown hair, skinny, upper middle class, or wealthy families. Like it's rooted in that to make you feel like you don't have enough because you don't have those things and you don't look that way. So imposter syndrome in a lot of ways also is kind of rooted in childhood poverty. Like I've seen a lot of people who grew up in poverty who have been able to go to college and be successful, but they still feel like they're an imposter because they came from this poor place or they came from this place that other people don't know about. And so
Right.
those are like with imposter syndrome, that's a huge thing
Mhm.
about thinking that your education is not enough, your certificates are not enough. So you see people, and I've seen this, I've done it myself, take multiple courses,
Mhm.
right? Like I can tell you, reform sabotage here, well, somewhat.
Mhm.
I took 1 year, I took 9 courses on building a better practice. I didn't need those 9 courses. They all
Wow.
said the same thing. But I took 9 because in my head, I was an imposter because I didn't know this, or I didn't know that, or I hadn't read this book, or I hadn't taken this class. And so I had to sit with myself and like get it together on like, you really don't need another class or course on doing the practice. You're already doing it. It's
Mhm.
it's thriving. You can
Mhm.
look at your, if you want to go monitor, you can look at your account every month and see there's something there that was more than before, right? You can look at the calls you get if you need to know like people are calling and it's not just because. So,
Yeah.
it's layers to it, but I have found that it really typically boils down to trauma. Same with perfectionism. I have to be perfect because if this thing isn't perfect, this will happen.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
that was just kind of my way of, helping people who normally wouldn't show up in therapy.
Absolutely. And identity.
Uh-huh.
Identity. So if I don't know who I am,
Yeah.
then it's very easy for me to look at the next person and think I'm supposed to be like this person, or
Yep.
think I'm missing something, or I'm
Mhm.
inadequate because I don't look like that person, right? Or
Exactly.
if it seems like this and we could talk all day about this, but this is very common. We see it,
Mhm.
and it's crippling people,
It
right?
is.
Crippling people
It
because
is.
you don't feel like you belong. You don't feel
Mhm.
like you are adequate enough to hold a title or to do the things that you're doing. So
Yeah.
it's a lot that's deep rooted there for sure.
I know we're going to the book, but I do want to say that's
Yeah.
how I wrote the book, right? Like so
Yeah.
I was trying to write a book about anxiety because that was my jam, right? Like even above attachment, anxiety was my jam. I could talk about it all day long. I could tell people, I could help people, I could show people how to, live with it, how to minimize. Anxiety was my jam. So I started off trying to write a book about anxiety and I couldn't do it. I would sit down every day in my designated time to write, couldn't get a single page written. And so I started writing my own process, like what was I going through? And then as I was writing it, I started looking at clients I was working with, friends, family. So I did use social media in that way to look at what were people talking about. And those were the things that was happening. So once I saw that, then I was like, wait, that is essentially what I do in session with people, right? Like we figure out what's going on. We figure out, why they want to change it, right? What's the motivation? And then we teach the skills to do that. And so, yeah.
Wow. Well, this is a great segue. Let's talk about that book, honey. Let's talk about that book.
Let's do it.
Yes. So tell us about the book. The book is, so for people who are listening, the book is entitled Get Out of Your Own Way.
It's called Get Out of Your Own Way, 21 Days to Stop Self-Sabotage. It's available on Amazon and my website. I wrote the book in 2018. And even in writing, I was trying to write about anxiety. It really was, I was trying to avoid grief. I lost my mother in 2017 and I was just crippled with grief and I needed an outlet. I was like, I got to do something to block out thinking about all of that. So that's what prompted me to even try to write about anxiety. And then I sent the book to a friend who's a publisher and she was like, no, you got to put this out. You got to put this out right now. And so I actually was able to release it on the anniversary of my mom's death a year later. So that's how, so that's where the book came from. It was out of grief and what I was doing to myself and the journey I needed to go on, not knowing I needed to go on that journey, right? Because I thought, I'm good in this space. I don't need to do anything more. I'm fine. That's not what God had for me.
Isn't it crazy how, let me first say, I'm so sorry for your loss. Beautiful things are birthed out of painful experiences.
I used to hate that phrase.
I know.
I did, especially right when she died, and people were like,
"Oh, that would not be the right time." Oh God.
I heard that it's God's will.
Oh God.
All types of things to basically say it needed to happen for these other things to happen. And while that might be true, that was not helpful. The first year, 2 years. Heck, still today sometimes.
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely not. God.
But it's true, right? And I see it, but it was painful,
I can imagine that. I can imagine. So get out of your own way. Talk about what is the message for the book, even if it comes from your own process. What is
I actually didn't write that it was my process in the book. I just started telling people because I need to be genuine. That's just how I live. But it was really just what I was doing with some of the clients I was working with, especially those professional women who really didn't want to be in therapy, but they were blowing up their lives. And so the book is a self-help book. I know a lot of people don't like self-help books, but it really is a self-help book because in there, I teach you what sabotage is. I teach you how to identify which category you fall in. I teach you how to identify your triggers. I teach you how to identify and change your self-talk, and then we implement it for 21 days. And the 21 days actually came from the Franklin Covey training that you Phil just put us through.
I love that. I love that.
because I was like, how do you change a habit? And I remembered that training when I don't remember, was it Cliff? I think I don't remember who did it, but he said, you can change your habits in 21 days. And I remember sitting in that training like, he's full of it. And so I started testing it on everything, like not just using my Covey, but any place I could find that I tested it. And I was like, it does work. You can really change a habit in 3 weeks if you're consistent. That's where the 21 days came from.
That's so good. So people can get the book on Amazon. And your website, what is your website?
It's my name, BrittanyAJohnson.com. I try to keep it super simple.
Awesome. And tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, so I initially created the podcast in 2020. And I did like 8 or 9 episodes then. And then I thought I needed to shift. It was me getting in my way. And so I didn't do any for quite a while. And then I did a few more in 2021. And then once again, I was like, kind of what you mentioned earlier, I should be monetizing this. And and this is what I told myself. And I know now that it's not true. It's taken away from what I could be doing because I'm not getting paid for it. And I know that it was not the right thought process. It just was what it was. So at the end of last year, I really sat down and, I like to end the year with reviewing and really looking at what I want to do the next year or the next few years. And I realized I love podcasting. I love to talk about mental health. I love to talk about topics that impact women, and podcasting is the way to do it. But I keep all of my episodes to 20 minutes or less because I know as a busy career mom woman, I don't have a lot of time to listen to podcasts. If it's 4 hours, it's going to take me a week to listen to that. And then by then you got another one now. So I keep the episodes 20 minutes or less, very self-help type driven. I open up about my own stuff in there with each topic. And so it's just a place where it's safe. You can come. It's not therapy. I do say that as a disclaimer. But it's topics that you can work with your therapist on. Or if you aren't needing actual therapy, but you just need something, it's an option to get you thinking, get you working on other ways to think about things.
Yeah, I need to do a better job with keeping mine 20 minutes. Sometimes it's like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. People listen to it, but
Yeah.
and I listen to it too, but I definitely, it just gets so good, but I totally
I
get
know.
that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the name of your podcast is, for people who don't know?
It is Get Out of Your Own Way with Brittany Johnson. I try to keep the whole brand that, but there is going to be a shift. Your listeners are going to be the first ones to hear that I actually am making a shift. There's going to be a name change and some other things because it's time to go bigger than just get out of your own way. It is really time to help women in all aspects of their life and to do what they need to do on their own accord.
Yes, and we'll get that. I'll get that information from you, whatever you want me to put in the show notes for sure.
Okay.
Well, let me just ask you one final thing for the
Okay.
woman who's listening, or the man, because I have men who listen too. For the person who's listening who heard your definition and is resonating with, oh my goodness, I'm doing this. I'm struggling with imposter syndrome. I'm struggling with insecurities. I am actually in my own way of my goals, and I see sabotage playing out in my life. In 60 seconds or less, if you can, what words of encouragement, what would you tell this person listening today?
I would tell this person listening to, first of all, give yourself grace because life happens. We learn these patterns from, history, so to speak. So give yourself grace first. Then secondly, really sit down with yourself and get honest with yourself. Because if you can't be honest with yourself, you're not going to be able to be honest anywhere else. So get honest with yourself on what is it? What is this thing that's telling me that I can't do this? And then from there, decide, is this something I need to go to a therapist about? Or is this something that I can do on my own? Because there are differences, right? If it's not rooted in, some attachment trauma or neglect or, something in that arena, you typically can work on it yourself, right? You typically don't have to go to therapy. I'm an advocate for therapy. I do think everybody needs to go to therapy, but I also understand, especially in this phase of life we're in right now, therapists are stretched. There are long wait lists right now. So that's what I would say.
Yeah.
And get my book to help you do it.
Get your book. Yes, ma'am. I'm going to get it too. Thank you so much, Brittany, for adding so much value to this episode. And y'all, I know that you got some points. I know that you took notes. I want you to blow Brittany up. Get on her website, brittany.johnson.com. Get her book, Get Out Your Own Way, on Amazon. You could just go to her website and get it from there as well. And also subscribe to her podcast. She is very passionate. She's very genuine, very purposeful in the work that she does. And I want you to really connect with her for sure. And thank you again, Brittany, for joining the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This is like home.
Yes, it is.
It's like full circle.
It is. It's so amazing. Well, y'all, I'll be back. This is Bewindi Bob. I want to remind you that these episodes do not replace the need for therapy. So if you need a therapist, please seek professional help. If you have any questions or if you are running into barriers about how to do that, you're welcome to message me. I'll put my information in the show notes. And I will be back next time with an amazing episode. Have a great week on purpose.